The soft evening light poured into the living room through the tall windows as Amanda stepped out of the bedroom wearing the charcoal silk dress I had given her for our anniversary 2 years ago. The fabric flowed over her figure, catching the last warm rays of sunset and turning the material into liquid silver. A new, richer scent of her perfume already hung in the air, spicy, almost heavy, with hints of sandalwood and vanilla, nothing like the light floral one I was used to. She paused in front of the hallway mirror, turning slightly to check the hem, her fingers brushing the fabric with unusual care. I thought our marriage was unbreakable, until the night she left for that party and never really came back the same. Hey everyone, I never thought I'd be telling this story. My name is Ryan. I'm 34, marketing manager at a mid-sized tech company downtown. I spend my days in glass-walled conference rooms, building campaigns and managing timelines, the kind of work that feels steady and predictable. Amanda and I had been together 10 years, married 8. No kids yet. We kept saying the timing wasn't right, that we needed to build something solid first, maybe buy a house with a backyard before we started a family. I was the steady one, the planner who made Sunday meal prep lists and remembered to change the air filters. Lately, though, the growing silence between us had started to make me uneasy, like a faint static under every conversation. Still, I trusted our history. I trusted her. Amanda was 32, a corporate project coordinator at the same kind of company but on the operations side. She had that natural charisma, the kind that lit up any room at work, made colleagues laugh during tense meetings, yet at home she could quietly pull away without a word, retreating into her phone or a long bath. That evening she moved with a restless energy I hadn't seen in months, heels clicking softly across the hardwood floor, fingers smoothing the dress over her hips a little too carefully as she checked herself in the hallway mirror. Her hair was down in loose waves, freshly styled, and she wore the silver earrings I'd given her last Christmas. Earlier that day had felt almost normal. I'd come home from the office around 6, kicked off my shoes in the entryway, and found her in the kitchen chopping vegetables for a quick stir-fry. The smell of garlic and sesame oil filled the apartment, warm and familiar. We ate at the small dining table by the window, talking about my latest campaign deadline and her frustrating meeting with a difficult client. She laughed at my joke about the boss's terrible tie, but her laugh didn't quite reach her eyes. When I asked if everything was okay at work, she waved it off with a quick "just busy, you know how it is," and changed the subject to the new coffee shop that opened down the block. Now, standing by the door, she picked up her clutch and checked her phone one last time. "Lauren's work thing turned into a proper party," she said, voice light but carrying a faint edge of haste. "Her boyfriend's coming too, some guy from accounting. Might run late. Don't wait up." I leaned against the kitchen counter, arms crossed, trying to keep my tone casual. "What's the boyfriend's name again? You mentioned him last week, right?" When I asked for the boyfriend's name, she paused for half a second, eyes flicking to the phone in her hand. "Kevin. I think? Or something like that. You know how it is with them, names blur after a while." She gave a small laugh that sounded forced, then leaned in and kissed my cheek. "Cool, quick," already turning toward the door. The lock clicked shut behind her. The apartment settled into silence. Only the low hum of the refrigerator and the distant murmur of the city outside remained. Her coffee mug from earlier still sat on the counter, faint lithic mark on the rim, the handle turned exactly the way she always left it. I walked over and picked it up, feeling the residual warmth against my palm. The kitchen light reflected off the stainless steel sink, and I caught my own reflection, tired eyes, 5 o'clock shadow. I told myself it was nothing. Just a work party. Just Amanda needing a night out after a long week of back-to-back deadlines and team-building nonsense. But that tiny hesitation, the new perfume, the way her gaze had slid away when she said the name, it lodged somewhere deep under my ribs and refused to leave. I wandered into the living room, sank onto the couch, and stared at the framed photo on the shelf, the two of us on our honeymoon in Santorini, smiling against a backdrop of white buildings and blue sea. Back then everything felt effortless. When had the effortless part started slipping away? I opened my laptop to answer a few work emails, but my mind kept drifting. I remembered how we used to spend Friday nights like this together, ordering Thai food, watching documentaries, her head on my shoulder. Lately those nights had become rarer. She'd been working late more often, coming home with stories about Lauren's drama or endless project updates. I'd noticed her spending extra time getting ready in the mornings, choosing outfits with more care, but I chalked it up to her wanting to feel confident at the office. The minutes ticked by. 8:30. 9. I texted her once, "Have fun, love you," and the message sat unread. By 10 I was pacing the living room, the wooden floor cool under my bare feet. The city lights twinkled outside the windows like distant stars. I tried to focus on a book, but the words blurred. Every small sound in the apartment, the creak of the settling building, the soft whoosh of the air conditioning, felt amplified. I had no idea the party didn't even exist. I had no idea that by the time she came home the next morning, everything I thought I knew about us would already be cracking at the seams. Ryan begins in the anxious avoidant middle ground typical of long-term partners who sense drift but fear rocking the boat. His unease is already present, small observations of micro-movements, scent changes, verbal hesitation, yet he immediately rationalizes them as his own oversensitivity. This is classic attachment buffering, preserving the illusion of stability by discounting intuition. Amanda's charismatic yet emotionally avoidant personality shows in the calculated lightness of her story and the subtle physical withdrawal, cool kiss, quick exit. The fabricated detail, boyfriend's name, is her first layer of compartmentalization, allowing her to step into the affair without immediate guilt. Sensory cues, sunset light, perfume, lipstick print, externalize the internal fracture, the home itself begins to feel slightly off-kilter. The audience is pulled into Ryan's cognitive dissonance before any concrete evidence appears, mirroring how betrayal often announces itself in whispers long before the scream. The next morning Amanda came home around 11, still wearing the charcoal dress but with her hair slightly tousled and carrying the faint trace of that same spicy perfume mixed with something else, maybe cigarette smoke or someone else's cologne. She kicked off her heels by the door and gave me a tired smile. God, what a night! Lauren's parties always go longer than planned. She headed straight for the shower without much more detail. I made coffee and waited at the kitchen table, the sunlight now bright and unforgiving across the wooden surface. When she emerged in sweatpants and a loose t-shirt, hair damp, she accepted the mug but kept her phone face down on the counter. "Thanks, babe," she said, scrolling through messages with quick thumbs. Her screen brightness was turned all the way down, something I'd never noticed her do before. Over the following 2 weeks the small shifts accumulated like quiet snowdrifts. She started working late 3 or 4 nights a week, always blaming Lauren or a sudden project crunch. She bought new lingerie at the mall one Saturday, just for myself, I deserve to feel good, and spent extra time on her hair and makeup even on weekdays. When I walked into the bedroom while she was texting, she would angle the screen away or lock it instantly with a casual flick. One Thursday evening I came home early from a client meeting and found her in the kitchen laughing softly her phone. The moment she saw me the laugh died, replaced by a quick, "Just Lauren sending memes about the office." But her cheeks stayed flushed longer than they should have. That night she fell asleep with the phone under her pillow again. I lay awake beside her, listening to her even breathing, the ceiling fan spinning lazily above us. The room felt warmer than usual, or maybe it was just the knot in my chest. I told myself I was being ridiculous. 10 years together didn't vanish because of late nights and new perfume. She'd always been social, this was probably just a phase after a stressful quarter. I mentioned the changes to Mark over beers after work the following Friday. My college best friend, now an IT specialist who could fix anything from code to broken relationships with blunt honesty, listened with his usual calm pragmatism. We sat at our regular corner booth in the dimly lit pub, the smell of fried food and spilled beer thick in the air. "Little things add up, man," he said, peeling the label off his bottle. "You sure everything's okay at home? You look like you haven't slept in days." I shrugged it off. "She's just stressed at work. You know how Amanda gets when a project heats up." Mark gave me a long look but didn't push. Then came the Friday she announced another Lauren party. Same charcoal dress, freshly dry cleaned this time, same new perfume that now felt like a warning. She hesitated again when I asked for details while she touched up her lipstick in the mirror. "It's at that rooftop bar downtown. Ethan from my old team said it's going to be huge, live music, open bar, the works." Ethan, our mutual college friend who worked in education now and still texted me memes every week, had actually messaged me earlier that afternoon afternoon asking if we wanted to grab dinner. I didn't mention it. Instead, I watched her slip on her heels, the way her shoulders tensed when she checked her reflection one last time. She left at 7:30 p.m. sharp. By 9 p.m. I was pacing the living room, the city lights twinkling mockingly outside the windows. At 10:30 I texted her, "How's the party?" No reply. At 11 p.m. the unease turned into something sharper. I picked up my phone and called Lauren. "Hey Ryan, what's up?" Lauren's voice was surprised but warm, the sound of TV in the background. "Is Amanda still at the party with you?" A short silence. "Party? Ryan. I'm at home with my fiancé. We ordered pizza like 2 hours ago. Amanda told me she was working late tonight on that big client deck." The floor felt like it tilted beneath me. I thanked Lauren, hung up, and stood in the dark kitchen while the refrigerator hummed. The hesitation over the boyfriend's name, the rooftop bar, Ethan's confusion, every small crack suddenly widened into a chasm. I sat on the couch, the leather cool against my back, and replayed the last few weeks in my head, the flushed cheeks, the angled phone screens, the new perfume that wasn't for me. I didn't confront her when she came home at 2 a.m., smelling of wine and that same heavy scent. She slipped into bed quietly, murmuring, "Sorry, it ran super late." I pretended to be asleep, but my mind was wide awake, turning every detail over like puzzle pieces that no longer fit. Something was wrong. Terribly wrong. And for the first time, I couldn't convince myself it was all in my head. Ryan's primary mistake is classic conflict-avoidant rationalization. Every red flag is reframed as his insecurity or Amanda's work stress. Amanda's mistake is underestimating how small lies accumulate. Each inconsistent detail, Lauren alibi, Ethan mention, phone habits, tightens the noose she thinks she's escaping. Lauren's unknowing involvement and Ethan's innocent overlap become unintended red herrings that delay Ryan's action. The lesson emerging for Ryan: suppressed intuition is not protection, it is delayed devastation. For Amanda, secrecy requires perfect consistency, and perfect consistency is impossible when validation seeking overrides caution. The audience learns that the little things ignored in part 1 are the same threads that will unravel everything in later parts. The following week I became a detective in my own life, moving through our apartment like a shadow, hyper-aware of every detail. I started noticing patterns. Amanda's phone usage spiked between 8 and 11 p.m., she changed her passcode because the old one was too easy, and her calendar suddenly showed vague client dinners on nights she claimed to be with Lauren. One Tuesday I checked the joint credit card app at 3 a.m. while she slept, 2 charges at an upscale Italian restaurant downtown on nights she'd said she was working late. When I casually asked about it the next morning over breakfast, the smell of fresh coffee filling the kitchen, she said, "Oh, team off-site. Lauren helped coordinate the catering." The explanation was smooth. Too smooth. Moral dilemmas kept me awake. Was checking her phone a betrayal of trust, or was living in this fog of uncertainty worse? I fought that war in my head every night, the bedroom air thick with unspoken questions. Red herrings kept coming. A lingerie receipt she laughed off as a surprise for you that I ended up returning. An unfamiliar men's cologne scent on her coat she blamed on sharing a cab with a client who douses himself in the stuff. Ethan texted me a casual "How's Amanda?" and I almost convinced myself the whole thing was a one-night flirtation that had already fizzled. Psychological strain built slowly. I developed insomnia, lying awake listening to the ticking of the wall clock, my mind replaying every conversation. At work I stared at campaign slides without seeing them, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead like static in my brain. One afternoon I drove past the restaurant listed on the credit card, sleek black awning, valet parking, and felt my stomach twist. Then one Thursday evening Amanda left her phone on the coffee table while she ran downstairs to grab the mail. The screen was still unlocked. I didn't open messages, I just swiped to location history. For visits to that same Italian restaurant in the last 6 weeks, plus 2 to a boutique hotel nearby. My hands shook. I closed the app the second I heard her footsteps on the stairs. That night I barely slept. The next morning, I told Mark everything over a hurried lunch at a quiet cafe, the smell of espresso and toasted sandwiches around us. He listened, then said quietly, "You need proof before you blow up your life, but don't wait too long, Ryan." This is eating you alive. I had the undeniable thread, location pins, credit charges, alibis that didn't match, but I hadn't pulled it all the way yet. The fear of what I might find kept me frozen on the edge of certainty. Ryan expected the longevity of 10 years to act as armor. Reality delivered the opposite. The longer the relationship, the deeper the blind spot. He expected Lauren's involvement to be innocent friendship. Reality showed her being unknowingly used as cover. He expected any issue to be fixable with a conversation. Reality was methodical deception with someone he didn't even have a name for yet. The gap between illusion and truth widens with every red herring, making the eventual collapse feel both shocking and inevitable. This section illustrates how denial reframes evidence until the weight becomes unbearable. Saturday evening, I followed the location pin. The Italian restaurant glowed with warm amber lighting, white tablecloths, and soft jazz drifting onto the sidewalk. I parked across the street, heart hammering, and waited. At 8:15 p.m. Amanda walked in wearing the charcoal dress again, laughing as she took the arm of a tall, well-dressed man in his mid-30s, sharp jaw, confident stride. They were seated at a corner table by the window. I watched from the shadows as he leaned across the table, brushed a strand of hair from her face, and kissed her slow, intimate, the kind of kiss that belonged only to us once. My world narrowed to that single moment. The street noise faded. I crossed the road, pushed through the heavy glass door, and walked straight to their table. The smell of garlic and aged wine hit me, but all I could focus on was Amanda's face draining of color when she looked up. Ryan. The man, I later learned his name was Nathan, the Mr. Perfect from Eros everyone whispered about, froze with his hands still on hers. Her wedding ring glinted under the chandelier light as she tried to pull away. Enjoying your Lauren party? I said quietly, voice steady despite the roaring in my ears. The restaurant noise dimmed around us, a few heads turned. Amanda stood, chair scraping. It's not what you think. It's exactly what I think. 6 months, Amanda. Hotel stays, secret dinners, lies stacked on lies. I called Lauren. I saw the locations. I watched you kiss him. Tears welled in her eyes. Nathan muttered something and excused himself. The silence at the table was deafening, broken only by the clink of silverware at nearby tables. Back home the confrontation continued in our living room, dim lamplight casting long shadows. She broke down on the couch, shoulders shaking. It started as emotional support at work. He listened when I felt invisible. I never meant for it to go this far. You chose this repeatedly, I said, the words cutting through the heavy air. You looked me in the eye and lied about a party that never existed. You wore the dress I bought you while you were with him. She begged for another chance, suggested therapy, promised it was over. But the point of no return had already passed. The stillness after her tears subsided was louder than any shouting. Trust had shattered, and nothing she said could glue the pieces back together. The true point of no return is not the kiss itself, it is Amanda's admission that the affair provided the validation she felt missing at home, reframing every previous I love you as conditional. Once the public exposure via the wedding ring happened, reconciliation became psychologically impossible for Ryan. The relationship died the moment deception became spectacle. The next weeks were a blur of cold silences and practical conversations. Amanda moved into the guest room, then stayed with Lauren for a few nights. The apartment felt hollow, her perfume no longer lingered in the bathroom, her favorite mug stayed in the cupboard. Mark offered his spare room if I needed space, and I took him up on it for a weekend just to breathe. We met at a neutral coffee shop to discuss separation. Sunlight streamed through the large windows, highlighting the exhaustion on both our faces. She looked thinner, eyes red-rimmed, and tried to reach for my hand. I pulled back. I've contacted a lawyer. We'll divide everything fairly, no fighting over furniture or savings. Dr. Wallace, the calm mid-50s marriage counselor we saw once, facilitated one accountability session. In his quiet office with soft beige walls and the faint scent of lavender, Amanda admitted the affair had lasted 6 months and was more emotional than she'd let on. I listened without anger, just a heavy clarity settling in my chest. I changed the locks the following week. Removed my wedding ring and placed it in the drawer beside old photos. The first night alone, I walked the city streets until 2 a.m., cold air sharpened my lungs, and felt something shift, not relief yet, but the beginning of space where my own thoughts could finally live. The decision came in late November, full separation leading to divorce. No reconciliation. Amanda expressed deep remorse in long messages I read but didn't answer immediately. I scheduled individual therapy and started rebuilding routines, morning runs, evenings with Mark playing basketball at the local court, the thud of the ball echoing my steadying heartbeat. Heartbreak translated into controlled action, sleeping in the guest room, changing locks, removing the ring. Grief became structured: lawyer appointments, asset lists, therapy sessions. Amanda's regret manifested as tears and promises, Ryan's clarity manifested as boundaries. The secondary twist of Lauren's unknowing alibi and Nathan's public role deepened Ryan's sense of isolation, pushing him toward Mark and Dr. Wallace as safe anchors. Every practical step outwardly rebuilt what betrayal had dismantled inwardly. 8 months later, the divorce was finalized on a crisp spring morning. The papers arrived by mail. I signed them at the kitchen table with sunlight streaming across the wood, the same table where we once shared lazy Sunday breakfasts. The apartment was quieter now, lighter. I had repainted the walls a soft neutral gray, bought new bedding, and turned the guest room into a home office. New routines grounded me: dawn runs along the river path where the air smelled of fresh grass and distant rain, weekend hikes with Mark, evening coffee on the balcony watching the city wake up. I heard through mutual colleagues that Amanda and Nathan had ended badly once the affair lost its secrecy and thrill. She had started therapy on her own, and we exchanged polite messages about closing joint accounts, no bitterness, just the quiet acceptance that some chapters simply end. Emily, my old college friend who worked in education, reconnected during the separation. Her empathetic messages and occasional lunches reminded me that connection didn't have to mean romance right away. For the first time in years, I felt my life was truly mine to shape, cautious about trust, but no longer afraid of my own intuition. I realized something important while walking the park trail one golden evening, the leaves crunching under my shoes: trust isn't given forever just because time has passed. It must be chosen every day by both people. I ignored the small signs and paid the price. But I also learned that when a relationship ends, a clearer, stronger version of yourself can begin. I'm 35 now. The pain has softened into a scar that no longer aches with every heartbeat. I date occasionally, but only when it feels light and honest. The ground beneath my feet feels solid again, not because the betrayal never happened, but because I chose to keep walking forward anyway. For the first time in years, I wake up each morning and the day belongs to me. This story is ultimately about the quiet violence of unspoken truths and the slow reclamation of self after betrayal. Ryan's arc, from suppressed intuition to deliberate clarity, illustrates a universal truth: denial protects the relationship at the expense of the person. Amanda's charisma and validation-seeking masked an avoidant attachment style that sought external admiration rather than internal repair. The web of alibis, Lauren, Ethan, fabricated parties, and the public restaurant exposure served to mirror how reality is rarely linear. Betrayal often hides behind plausible stories until the weight of evidence collapses the facade. The double twist, that the party was never the beginning but merely one chapter in a 6-month deliberate choice, shifts the emotional meaning of every earlier scene. Ultimately, the narrative affirms that personal empowerment does not require forgiveness or revenge, it requires the courage to release what no longer respects you. Situations like this happen more often than we admit, yet the real victory is how many people choose to rebuild stronger on the other side. Ryan did. And that is the quiet, lasting triumph.